A 62-year-old woman with ashen skin and trembling lips. Her breathing came in shallow, painful gasps, each exhale releasing a stench so foul it made even the attending nurse cover her nose. It wasn't just bad breath. It smelled like rotting garbage mixed with decay, something deeply unnatural. Dr. Claire Dawson, the on-call emergency physician, rushed forward, pulling on her gloves. "What's her oxygen?" she demanded. 78 and dropping, doctor," replied Nurse Jenna Morales, her voice tight with fear. Helen's husband, George Brooks, stumbled in behind the stretcher, his face pale and wet with sweat. "She was fine this morning," he cried. Then she started gagging, said her throat felt heavy. "I thought it was indigestion." Dr. Claire leaned close to the patient. Helen's eyes fluttered open for a second, glassy and terrified. "Please, help me," she whispered weakly before her body tensed in pain. The monitor beeped faster. Claire signaled to the team. "Let's intubate now." As the tube slid down Helen's throat, the odor became almost unbearable. The anesthesiologist gagged and turned away. Claire forced herself to focus. She'd seen infections, abscesses, even necrosis before, but nothing like this. "Get me a chest x-ray, full blood panel, and an ENT consult, stat." Nurses scattered. Machines hummed. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a cold glow over Helen's motionless form. George pressed his palms together, whispering through tears, "Please don't let her die." Claire's eyes met his briefly, calm but serious. "We're doing everything we can." As the gurney rolled toward the diagnostic wing, a metallic taste of dread filled the air. No one in that room knew it yet, but what was festering inside Helen's body would soon horrify everyone who saw it. Dr. Claire Dawson stood in front of the observation window, her gloved hands resting on the edge of the glass. Inside, Helen Brooks lay still under a web of wires and blinking monitors. The rhythmic hum of medical machines filled the silence between beeps. Claire's sharp eyes scanned the vitals on the screen, heart rate unstable, oxygen low, blood pressure erratic. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her own pulse. She had been in medicine for 15 years, yet something about this case unsettled her. The smell still lingered in her mask, the putrid, garbage-like odor that had poured from Helen's mouth. It wasn't something a person could forget. Even after washing her hands twice, the stench seemed to cling to her memory. "Dr. Dawson," Nurse Jenna said quietly, approaching with a clipboard. "The labs are being processed. But her white cell count's off the charts, and her breath, it's only getting worse." Claire nodded, eyes still fixed on the motionless patient. "She's fighting something deep inside," she murmured. "Something the body's been hiding for a long time." Outside the ER, George Brooks sat slumped in a plastic chair, wringing his hands. Through the glass, he watched the doctor who now held his wife's life in her hands. He didn't know her name, but he could sense her determination. Claire turned to her team. "We'll need imaging, chest CT, abdominal scan, and ENT consult immediately. Whatever's causing this, it's not just infection. It's something trapped, decomposing from the inside." Her words sent a chill through the room. And as the clock ticked past midnight, the hospital lights dimmed slightly, as if the building itself sensed something terrible was waiting to be uncovered. The night outside Boston General Hospital was silent, but inside room 214, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. Helen Brooks lay unconscious, her breathing uneven. The mechanical hiss of the ventilator filled the room like a metronome of dread. Dr. Claire Dawson reviewed the patient's chart under the harsh glow of a desk lamp. Fever, rapid pulse, oxygen deprivation. Yet nothing explained the unbearable stench that still leaked from Helen's mouth even under sedation. "Her breath shouldn't smell like that," Claire muttered, flipping through the lab results. "Not unless there's advanced tissue rot or gas-producing bacteria somewhere deep inside." Nurse Jenna Morales approached with another update. "Blood pressure keeps dipping. Antibiotics don't seem to touch it. It's like her body's fighting a ghost." Claire looked up. "And the x-ray?" "Unclear, ma'am. There's something near the upper esophagus. It doesn't look solid, maybe trapped gas or decayed food material." Claire frowned. "Get a CT scan immediately. An alert surgical standby, just in case." Across the hallway, George Brooks sat on a hard bench, his face buried in his hands. He hadn't eaten since morning, the coffee in the paper cup had gone cold hours ago. He replayed every moment, the breakfast Helen barely touched, the way she'd coughed so hard she almost fainted, and that awful rancid smell that filled the room before she collapsed. He whispered into the empty corridor, "Please, Helen, don't leave me now." Inside the exam room, Claire stood by the window, watching the fog roll against the city lights. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, something invisible yet deadly. Whatever was decaying inside Helen wasn't just making her sick. It was trying to kill her, quietly from within. The hum of the monitor grew louder and Claire turned sharply. Helen's vitals were dropping again. The dim light of the radiology lab flickered across the cold white walls as Dr. Claire Dawson stood beside the glowing screen. The CT scan of Helen Brooks's chest slowly came into focus, line by line, until a dark, irregular shadow appeared near the base of her throat. Claire leaned closer. "Pause there," she said to the technician. He froze the image. The area near Helen's upper esophagus and lower pharynx showed an abnormal pocket, an empty cavity that shouldn't exist. Nurse Jenna Morales, standing behind her, frowned. "Could that be a tumor?" Claire shook her head slowly. "No, it's not solid. Look, the edges are too thin, too fluid. It looks like a hollow sac." The technician zoomed in. Inside that shadowed cavity, faint layers of trapped gas bubbles and dense organic matter were visible. Whatever was inside had been there for a long time. In the nearby observation room, George Brooks pressed his face to the glass, searching for answers in the doctor's expressions. He couldn't hear what they were saying, only see the tension in their eyes. Every minute felt like an hour. He saw Dr. Claire remove her glasses, pinch the bridge of her nose and sigh. That small gesture told him everything he needed to know. Something wasn't right. Back in the lab, Claire pointed at the screen. "See this? This mass here, it's full of compressed material. Could be old food, decayed tissue, maybe even trapped bacteria colonies. But the amount of gas means it's fermenting inside her." Jenna covered her mouth. "So the smell?" Claire nodded grimly. "It's coming from there. Whatever's decomposing in that cavity is releasing gases through her throat, and now it's poisoning her bloodstream." The air in the room grew heavy. Even the machines seemed to hum more quietly, as if listening. Claire straightened. "Prepare the ore. We need to operate before this turns septic." As she walked out, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on the hallway floor. The smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the faint trace of decay that still lingered, a reminder of the rot that was slowly consuming Helen from the inside. The hospital had fallen silent. Only the faint hum of fluorescent lights echoed through the empty corridors as Dr. Claire Dawson sat alone in her office, surrounded by scans, charts, and coffee cups gone cold. Helen Brooks's CT images glowed on the monitor, that strange shadow inside her throat taunting Claire like an unsolved riddle. She zoomed in again, studying the irregular pocket. It wasn't behaving like a normal infection or abscess. Something about it felt alive. Claire pulled up the lab results one more time. White blood cells were spiking, indicating severe infection. But no bacteria matched the sample they took from Helen's saliva. It was a mixture of anaerobic strains, the kind that only survive in places where oxygen cannot reach. She whispered under her breath, "Something's rotting, but why here?" Nurse Jenna Morales knocked gently and entered, holding a folder. "Doctor, it's past midnight. You haven't eaten all day." Claire forced a tired smile. "I'll eat after we save her." Jenna hesitated, then set down the file. "I checked older cases. There's one 20 years ago, same symptoms. A man in Chicago. His breath smelled like death. They found a decomposing pouch in his throat wall. The condition was called Zenker's diverticulum," Claire finished, eyes widening. Her pulse quickened. "A rare esophageal pouch. It traps food and decays it from inside. That's why she smells like garbage." Jenna nodded. It could burst any moment, releasing toxins into her bloodstream. Claire stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. "Get the surgical team ready. We're not waiting until morning." As she walked through the dim hallway toward the ore, thunder rumbled faintly outside. The storm mirrored her thoughts, dark, restless, full of warning. For a brief second, she stopped and looked through the window at the city lights below. She whispered to herself, "Hang on, Helen. I won't let you die because of this." Lightning flashed outside the tall windows of Boston General Hospital, turning the hallways pale white for a second before plunging them back into shadow. The storm had arrived, and inside the surgical wing the atmosphere was just as electric. Dr. Claire Dawson stood at the scrub station, washing her hands for the third time. Her reflection in the steel panel looked exhausted but resolute. Behind her, the ore buzzed with controlled chaos. Machines beeped. The ventilator hissed. The anesthesiologist adjusted doses in silence. "Vitals?" Claire asked sharply as she entered the room. "Heart rate, 96. Oxygen holding at 88, replied Nurse Jenna Morales. "She's unstable, but we can start." Helen Brooks lay motionless under bright surgical lights, pale, fragile, her chest rising and falling with machine rhythm. Even under anesthesia, the foul stench lingered faintly in the air, sickly sweet and rotten. Everyone in the room had noticed it. No one dared to speak of it. "Scalpel," Claire said firmly. The instrument gleamed as it touched Helen's skin. The incision was small, precise, running along the base of the neck. Monitors beeped faster, the tension building with every movement. Claire worked carefully, navigating around fragile tissue and inflamed muscle. "Retractors," she commanded. Jenna handed them over, her hands trembling slightly. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sweat gathered under Claire's mask as she followed the scan's map in her mind. Finally, a flicker of something caught her eye, a thin, bulging pocket along the esophageal wall, pulsing faintly like it had its own heartbeat. "There it is," Claire breathed. "Everyone stay focused." She made a small incision around the pouch. A sudden gush of thick, brownish fluid spilled out. The smell was immediate, overwhelming, like a mix of rotting meat and sulfur. The anesthesiologist gagged and turned away. Claire didn't move. Her voice was steady. "Suction now. Keep it clean." For a moment, the entire room seemed frozen, watching in disbelief as the fluid drained. Even through masks, their eyes told the same story. Whatever was inside Helen Brooks was beyond anything they'd ever seen before. A heavy silence fell over the operating room. Only the sound of the suction machine filled the air, pulling away thick, dark fluid that smelled like decomposition itself. Dr. Claire Dawson leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the small cavity inside Helen's throat. The opening pulsed faintly, releasing more foul liquid. But something beneath the sludge caught her eye, a faint movement, almost like a twitch. "Wait," she said sharply. "Stop suction for a second." The room went still. Everyone held their breath. Inside the cavity, the soft tissue seemed to ripple, then shift. A thin strand, pale, string-like, wriggled through the opening. What is that?" whispered Nurse Jenna Morales, her voice trembling. Claire squinted under the light, her surgical camera zoomed in. At first, she thought it was a piece of decomposed tissue. But as it moved again, curling slowly like something alive, her blood ran cold. "Oh my God," she breathed. "They're living organisms." Gasps filled the room. The surgeons exchanged horrified glances as Claire carefully reached for fine surgical tweezers. She pulled gently, and what emerged made everyone step back. A cluster of tiny worm-like organisms, thin as threads but clearly moving, slid out from the dark pouch, coated in decayed mucus. The suction device whirred again, pulling them away into a sterile container. "Are they parasites?" the anesthesiologist muttered, his voice shaky. "Not exactly," Claire replied, her tone half disbelief, half awe. "They look like anaerobic microorganisms feeding off decomposed material, similar to Necator or Strongyloides, but I've never seen them thrive in a human esophagus." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. How could she even live with that inside her? Claire didn't answer. She was too focused, carefully extracting every trace of infected tissue. The smell grew worse for a moment, then began to fade as the cavity emptied. When the last fragment was removed, Claire finally exhaled. The monitor stabilized slightly. Helen's oxygen rose from 82 to 90. "Clean the site," Claire instructed softly. "I think we just removed the source." No one spoke. The silence carried both horror and relief, the kind that only comes after staring into something truly unthinkable. Claire stepped back, staring down at Helen. Beneath the surgical lights, the older woman looked fragile, human again, as if the darkness that had been eating her alive had finally been forced to let go. The air in the operating room was thick with exhaustion and adrenaline. Dr. Claire Dawson had just finished removing the last trace of the infected tissue when the monitor emitted a single, shrill beep, then another. The rhythm was wrong. "Doctor," her heart rates dropping. Nurse Jenna Morales shouted. Claire's head snapped up. The green line on the screen dipped violently, then flattened. "Cardiac arrest. Get the paddles, now." The anesthesiologist pushed back from his station, panic flashing in his eyes. "She's not responding." "Move," Claire barked. She snatched the defibrillator paddles, pressing them to Helen's chest. "Charging to 200. The machine whined, then, thump. Helen's body jerked violently. Still nothing. Again, 250. Claire shouted, voice breaking through the storm of sound. Sweat rolled down her temple, her hands steady despite the chaos. "Come on, Helen. Don't you dare quit on me now." Thump. The monitor flickered, then flatlined again. Jenna's voice cracked. "No pulse." George Brooks, standing just beyond the observation glass, could only watch as his wife's body convulsed under the electric shocks. He slammed his palms against the glass. "Helen, please." Inside, Claire clenched her jaw. "One more time, 300. She pressed the paddles again. Thump. The monitor beeped faintly. Then again. A rhythm returned. Slow, unsteady, but alive. Claire exhaled shakily, lowering the paddles. "She's back," she whispered. "We got her back." The team let out a collective sigh of relief. Outside, thunder rumbled one last time before the storm began to fade. And for the first time that night, so did the smell of death inside the room. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds of Helen Brooks's recovery room. Machines hummed softly, now routine instead of frantic. Her chest rose and fell steadily, a rhythmic sign of life that had once seemed so uncertain. Dr. Claire Dawson stood at the bedside, watching Helen's pale face. The older woman's eyes fluttered open, glassy and confused at first, then focusing slowly. "Claire?" she whispered, her voice raspy but full of recognition. Claire smiled gently. "Yes, Helen. You're safe now. You're going to be okay." Tears welled up in George Brooks's eyes as he was allowed inside the room. He held her hand, fingers trembling. "I thought I lost you," he said, his voice breaking. Helen tried to smile, the corners of her lips lifting faintly. I feel different," she murmured, still weak, still fragile. Claire knelt beside her. "You were very sick. There was a pouch in your esophagus filled with decayed material and harmful bacteria. It's what caused the smell, the infections, everything." Helen's eyes widened, a mix of fear and disbelief. You saved me?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Yes," Claire replied softly. "But you have to rest now. Recovery is the next step." Nurse Jenna Morales brought a warm blanket and a cup of tea. "We'll make sure you're comfortable," she said. Outside the room, the first light of morning illuminated the hospital courtyard. George held Helen's hand a little tighter, whispering words of love and relief. Claire stepped back, watching the family reunite. Her heart ached with exhaustion, but it swelled with quiet pride. Helen's recovery had begun, slowly, carefully, but undeniably. The nightmare that had threatened to consume her life had been stopped just in time. And though the memory of the stench, the bacteria, and the wriggling organisms would haunt her in the story's telling, Helen herself had been given a second chance at life. Claire whispered to herself as she left the room, "We can't save everyone, but when we do, it makes every second worth it." Days had passed since Helen Brooks's emergency surgery, and the hospital's corridors had returned to their usual rhythm. But in room 214 life had changed. Helen sat upright in her bed, a soft blanket draped over her frail shoulders. She sipped warm tea slowly, savoring each swallow, something she hadn't been able to do without pain for years. George Brooks hovered nearby, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "You're really going to be okay," he said softly, his voice tinged with disbelief and gratitude. Helen smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I feel lighter. Like a weight has been lifted." Dr. Claire Dawson entered, notebook in hand. She checked Helen's vitals, her expression calm yet warm. "Your blood work is returning to normal. Your infection has cleared. We caught it just in time," she explained. Helen reached out, gripping Claire's hand. I don't even know how to thank you." Claire shook her head, smiling. "You did the hard part, you survived. That's the miracle." Nurse Jenna Morales brought a bouquet of flowers, placing them gently on the bedside table. "They smell much better than you ever did," she joked softly, eliciting a small chuckle from Helen and George. Outside the window, the Boston skyline glowed with the soft afternoon sun. The storm that had raged the night Helen nearly died was gone, replaced by calm and light. Claire stepped back, watching the family. For the first time that week, she felt the weight of tension ease. The hospital had been a battlefield, but here, in this quiet room, life had won. Helen turned to George, her hand in his. "Let's never take this for granted," she whispered. He nodded, tears of joy slipping down his cheeks. The experience had left them shaken, but alive. And as Helen drifted into a peaceful nap, the room was filled with something stronger than fear or pain: hope, recovery, and the quiet joy of survival. After Helen Brooks's dramatic ordeal, Dr. Claire Dawson took a moment to explain what had almost cost Helen her life. "The condition she had is called Zenker's diverticulum," Claire told George gently. "It's a pouch that forms in the upper part of the esophagus. Normally, food passes through smoothly, but in Helen's case, some food had become trapped over time." Claire continued, her voice calm yet serious. Inside the pouch, the food decayed and bacteria multiplied in the absence of oxygen. This is why her breath smelled like garbage. If left untreated, it can cause serious infections, sepsis, or even death. George listened intently, squeezing Helen's hand. This is very rare but preventable if caught early, Claire added. Symptoms to watch for include chronic bad breath, difficulty swallowing, frequent throat clearing, and unexplained infections. Helen nodded slowly, absorbing the reality of how close she had come to losing her life.